I remember when I played sports, we had coaches that had different mottos and different things that they would say to kind of get you fired up, you know. And some of those were things that made sense to me, you know, like, come on, guys, let's go out there and do the best we can, or remember what you practiced, or, you know, whatever the case. But I remember one that just never really made a whole lot of sense to me. And I remember one of the first times I ever heard it, and I had to kind of stop and think about it, but it was leave it all on the field. Leave it all on the field. That's what one of our coaches, you've heard that statement. That's a real popular statement for coaches to use. Leave it all on the court. Leave it all on the field, whatever. And the idea is that you should take everything that you have and put into what you're about to do. But I remember the first time I heard it thinking, well, I don't want to leave everything out there. I still want to go home when it's done. You know, like I'm too analytical. I was like, I don't like this idea of leaving everything out there. And then another statement that came along that has been used quite a bit that is literally impossible to do. When somebody says, give it 110%. It's impossible to give something 110%. You only have 100% to give. You can't give 101% or 102%, but I think we know what it means. It means dig down deep, reach down and give everything that you have. Take what's about to happen, what's right in front of you, and put all your focus on it. Put all your energy, all your training, everything right here on this on what you're about to do. Leave it all on the field means when you go past it and you look back, you have no regrets. You didn't hold back anything. You took everything you had, every drop of sweat, every amount of energy, every Gatorade that you drank right before the game, whatever it was, you put all of it into what you were going to do. And the idea was, don't take your foot off the gas. Put your foot on the gas pedal and put it all the way. But now, what if every player on the field did that all the time? If the whole time you were watching the game, they did that. They were just all moving at full speed. First of all, games would be a lot shorter because everybody would be completely exhausted. But secondly, there's times during things that you're supposed to kind of take it easy. Relax just a little bit. Catch your breath. That's the reason they call a timeout. That's the reason there's commercial breaks. Well, that's not the reason there's commercial breaks. But that's the reason there are breaks in the game. That's the reason those things are going on, because in order for a person to put everything that they have into something all the way through it, they need times where they catch their breath. They need times where they take a break. Well, there were phrases all throughout time that were very similar to the ones that we have, like give 110%, and one of those appears to be carry your cross. It could be that Jesus was the one that originated this one. I've studied a little bit, haven't come across anything that shows where that was a major statement that they used during the time. But Jesus took something they were very familiar with and put it in a scenario, it's mentioned 6 different passages, and it's probably 4 different times. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that in just a minute. 3 for sure, but maybe a 4th one. And the idea that he said is I want you to take up your cross. I want you to carry your cross. They would have taken that as an extreme. They would have taken that as they knew what the cross was. They knew when Jesus said that, they knew that the Romans had used that, probably adopted it from a previous civilization. It didn't go back super, super far, but it did go back quite a ways. And it was a way of punishing someone, you know the situation, of harming them. But it was more about the public nature. It was more about the humiliation of it. Going to the cross was something that everybody would see. It was a public execution that was to try to control the masses. Sometimes they would do it along the road so everybody could see, and it meant, there was a warning and it was a shame associated with it. The condemned would carry the cross to where they were to be crucified often. And you know the story of Jesus, and he did that. And what happened was there was 2 parts of the cross. There were the stipes, the cross part, and the patibulum that went up and down. The idea was that there was wherever they were going, the up and down part of the cross was usually already there. But once they were condemned and they were to walk where they were going, they would have that cross part that they would have to pick up on their shoulders. I mean, we don't know how much it weighed, but it's been estimated it weighs, 100 pounds maybe. Pretty heavy cross, man. I mean, you think about, we say a railroad tie or something like that. I mean, we're not exactly, we don't know exactly how heavy it was. But the point was, customarily, that you would have to take that part of the cross to where you were going. Jesus had to do that. As you know, after being beaten, after having no sleep, he couldn't. He fell under the weight of it. Simon Cyrene was called out of the crowd to help him do that. Which, by the way, in the day of judgment, I kind of like to see the eye contact between Jesus and Simon of Cyrene, because Simon was there at a time when Jesus needed someone on this earth the most. I don't know if he had to do it or if he wanted to do it. He was compelled to do it. But the point is, he did it. Well, this idea of carrying the cross, again, was something that was familiar with them. They knew what it was, but it was associated with shame. As Andrew mentioned, it was reserved for the worst criminals, the rebels, slaves, enemies of the state. It wasn't for just your average, ordinary person. It was about humiliation. Victims were stripped and exposed and mocked. It was a slow and exhausting death, not only for the punishment, but to warn anybody else. You don't want to do that. And these people that Jesus would talk to, they had seen that. Now, the Jews associated this with being cursed because of a passage in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23, where it says that it mentions he who is hanged on a tree. Who is hanged is accursed. They would have thought about this. They would have made that connection, even though at the time that connection wasn't there, because they weren't crucifying people in the times of the book of Deuteronomy. But the Jews had gotten that to the point where they had connected those things. And then in Galatians chapter 3, Paul actually does connect them when he said, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree." But at the time of Jesus being here, the Jews had just made that connection. The Romans would use this to crush rebellion. The Old Testament, when the book of Deuteronomy, they would hang people up after they had died as the sign. But it had been morphed through time and become one of those things that they would hang for them to die. The cross was brutal. It was agonizing. It was an extreme. It was it was one of those things that was used, and it was used quite a bit, but you had to be awful to get on a cross. You had to be really, really bad. You might have known of someone who was hung on a cross, or you had a family member, your crazy old uncle who you knew something bad was going to happen to him from the time you met him. You might have known somebody, but you knew what it was. Well, Jesus, as he's teaching, he begins to start using this phrase. Unless you are willing to carry your cross, unless you're willing to carry your cross. Have you ever thought about the fact that he said that before he died on the cross? That wasn't, you and I have the advantage of reading that and going, oh, well, Jesus meant that because that's what he did. But when he was saying that to people, he had not yet been on the cross. I mean, there was indication that the Messiah would have some sort of similar suffering. His hands would be pierced. But the Old Testament doesn't come out and say he's going to die on a Roman cross. So when Jesus is saying this, he's using this extreme. He's using this thing that people would have associated with something that was tough to handle. And he was trying to do it to bring about an emotion in them. He was trying to bring about something that was important. Now, Jesus did say in 3 different times that he would be lifted up. In the book of John, chapter 3, verse 18, he says, "And as Moses lifted up the servant in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up." But that was just between him and Nicodemus. That was the only two that heard that. In John chapter 8, Jesus said to them, "When you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father taught me, I speak these things. And he who sent me is with me. The Father has not left me alone, for I always do those things that please him." And so he indicated in that conversation that he would be lifted up. And then in John chapter 12, verse 32, the pastor's read just a moment ago, and I, if I'm lifted up from the cross, will draw all people to myself. And so he began to kind of indicate that this was something that was going to happen to him. But when he's using this phrase, it's still something that was hard for them. It's like the idea of give 110%, put all that you have into it. And so we're going to look at a couple of these passages today. I want you to turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 10. In Matthew chapter 10, we have the first time that we read about Jesus saying this. Now, this is the conversation that Jesus is having with apostles before he sends them out. And he makes some very strong statements. He tells them he wants them to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. He's told them that freely they've received and freely they give. So your attitude ought to be to try to get as much out there as possible. The point of this was, I'm going to send you out and I want you to tell everybody about me. Just scatter it everywhere. He mentioned things to encourage them, but he who endures to the end will be saved. Like, keep going, hang in there. And then he would tell them, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who's able to destroy both soul and body in hell. And he told them that this was the Father's will. And then in verse 32, he makes, of Matthew chapter 10, he makes the statement that we're so familiar with. Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But he who denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. And now he gets into this portion of this discussion with the apostles where he's going to really start getting, like he says, this is going to be difficult. This is going to be hard. This isn't going to be as pleasant as you want it to be. Do not think, verse 34, Matthew 10:34, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Well, wait just a second. I mean, this is getting hard all of a sudden. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemy will be those of his own household. He says, I'm telling you, there's going to be some who are going to like this, some who aren't. Some are going to believe, some won't. Some are going to welcome you, some won't. He's telling these apostles, this is going to be difficult what I'm asking you to do. And then verse 37, he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses life for my sake will find it. That's some strong statements. And what he's telling them in this scenario, in the context, he's telling them, I need you to not only do, but I need you to teach, click that for me, to elevate our commitment. Not working here. There we go. To elevate our commitment. He says, I want you to understand that what I'm asking you to do and what I'm asking you to ask others to do, what I'm telling you, that what I'm offering you and what I'm wanting you to go offer others, it's going to be hard. It's not always going to be the easy thing. But he says, in order to carry the cross, he uses it to say, I want you to elevate your level of commitment. I want even down to the most personal, intimate relationships in your life that your commitment to following Christ should be above everything in this life, everything, this extreme. Now, here's the interesting part. Just like I said, the games are not always run at 110%. You're not leaving it, but there are times to break. We don't always live our lives in the extremes. We're not always carrying a cross as a Christian. Sometimes there's great joy as a Christian. As a matter of fact, most of the time there's great joy. And so this was not designed to say Christianity is going to be awful. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be rough. It was meant that the phrase was used to say, I want you to be willing to follow me no matter what. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how hard it is, when it becomes that way. Christianity is not always miserable or difficult. And so the use of this phrase by Jesus was not designed to say that when you commit your life to Christ, you're committing your life to a life of division, a life of, no. He was saying in the scenario to the apostles, when you go teach people about me, I want you to understand that the level of commitment that I'm asking of people goes all the way down into their homes, into their families. It's an extreme. It's an extreme, but the extremes are used to say everything between here and there. See, a lot of times Christians are really, really willing to do the extreme things. But bearing the cross sometimes means everything in between there. It's not always these extreme things. It's the everyday things. It's just the being who we need to be, being the best versions of ourselves, being who God wants us to be. The next thing he's going to tell them, he's going to kind of shift gears and talks about a cup of cold water. So he's giving them two extremes. He says, I want you to help people understand that everything between giving somebody a cup of water and dying on a cross is what I'm expecting from them. And that's the kind of commitment that we should have to God through Jesus in the church. A level of commitment that's willing to do the cup of cold water thing and the die on the cross thing. Now I want you to go over to Matthew chapter 16. You skip forward, it's unclear how far this is, maybe somewhere between 6 months and a year. Where you get over to Matthew chapter 16 and Jesus has been talking to them about the church. That's what we know Matthew chapter 16 the most about. Now this is the passage that's mentioned 2 other times. Mark chapter 8 verse 34 and Luke chapter 9 and verse 23. This is the time where it's mentioned and Matthew, Mark, and Luke talk about this. But in this passage, starting at verse 21, in Matthew chapter 16, it says, from that time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised on the 3rd day. And then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. And again, you got to love Peter for this. I'm not going to let this happen. You're the Son of God. He gets a lot of negativity, but you see his heart in this. And Jesus is trying to make a point to him. He's trying to make a point that it's more about God's will than his will. He turned and said to him, get behind me, Satan. You're an offense to me, for you're not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. You're looking at it wrong. And then he says in verse 24, then Jesus said to his disciples, so Peter says this aside, and then they all kind of come back together. And he says, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Most of these people had heard him say it. Had heard him say it back in what we call the previous chapter, chapter 10. So he's almost like he's reminding them of this. I was talking to you too. These are the people who were sent out, and that was part of their commission. The limited commission was to go out, and that was part of what he told them when they went out. Now they've come back, and he's reminding them of this. For what profit is it, verse 26, to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works. Assuredly I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. What was Jesus trying to point out here? He says, if you're wanting to carry my cross, you've got to elevate sacrifice. Go back one. You got to elevate spirituality. Make sure we did this right. Elevate commitment, elevate spirituality. He's saying, all right, what if you were to gain everything in this world, but you lost your soul? Would it be worth it to you? You had peace with everybody because you just overlooked problems. You didn't really stand for any truths. You just allowed everybody to just, go along peacefully with that. And that you just worked on yourself and you just amassed a wealth and you only focused on you and you had everything in your life that you wanted. But that wasn't what God wanted for you in your life. And because of that, you lost your soul. You got to think spiritually. That's the context of the phrase here. Peter, I love your heart. You're standing up and you're saying, I'm not going to let that happen to you. This isn't going to happen. I don't think you're seeing this right, Jesus. And he goes, no, you're not looking at this from the right direction. I don't think when he said, get behind me, Satan, that he was chastising him in a negative way. I think it was in a pretty loving way. Because what he was trying to point out is what he then uses in the context, and that was, you've got to look at this the right way. Peter, I didn't come here to stay here. Peter, I didn't come here to live a really nice life and everything be easy and simple. I know what's outside of this life. I know what was before this life. I know what's after this life. And I'm seeing this from a place that you're not seeing this. And so he uses the phrase and he says, if you are the kind of person who wants to carry your cross like Jesus is saying to, then what he's saying is you've got to see the purpose of the cross. The spiritual aspect of it. The fact that we live a physical life with a spirit inside of us that will live past this life. And the decisions I make and the words I use and the way I live my life, the focus, the commitment, the things that I prioritize in my life should be based on the inner person, the spiritual thing. The carrying the cross, when Jesus said this, and three of the gospel writers use it and show it in this context, is concentrate on spiritual. Elevate the spiritual in your life. Well, then you move forward just a little bit more. And you look at the next time. Now, this is the time that's a little, go to Mark chapter 10. This is the time, and I need to explain that this is not, it's not found in every translation of the Bible. As you know, there are translations that use different manuscripts. And in the New King James, a couple other translations, it's in here. They believe that it was added later by scribes because of the previous passage. Because Jesus said, if you gain the whole world but lose your soul, what good is it for you? Then he's talking to a man who has all of the world but is about to lose his soul. But for the illustration purposes, the context doesn't even need it. It still stands exactly the way it needs to. In Mark chapter 10, starting at verse 17, now as he was going out on the road, one came running, knelt before him and asked him, good teacher, what shall I do that I may inherit eternal life? How can I go to heaven? So he said to him, why do you call me good? No one's good but one, that's God. Again, Jesus is always glorifying the Father. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and your mother. He didn't give them all, he just gave them a list. And he answered and said to him, teacher, all these things I've kept from my youth. And Jesus, looking at him and loved him. I love that Mark adds that. Mark's the only one that adds that. I love that he says that he looked at him and loved him. What does it look like when Jesus looks at you and loves you and says something, Like what's the eyes of a loving Jesus look like when he looks at you? Because you've come up thinking that you're doing good. You're really wanting affirmation. You really want him to say, but you're doing great. Look how much God's blessed you. He's given you all this stuff because of how good you're doing. And you really want to hear a yes, but Jesus looks at him and loves him and said to him, one thing you lack. Go your way, sell whatever you have and give to the poor, and you'll have treasures in heaven. And this is the part that the New King James, a couple other translations do have, that some don't. It's based on the translation. He says, and come take up your cross and follow me. But he was sad at this word, and he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Here's the key here. Whether or not it was used in this passage, whether or not Jesus said it in this interaction, the point is still the exact same that was before, but even exemplified in a different way. And that is that you and I ought to be the kind of people who elevate sacrifice. We've gone at lengths. Andrew did a great job of this a while ago. You can read about the agonizing, excruciating, all the details of someone who dies on a cross. I mean, it was awful. I mean, it was terrible. It was such an extreme. It was, and Jesus could have died. He could have chosen the way he was going to die. As a matter of fact, it seems as though he did. But he could have decided that it be done a different way. He'd have come at a different time. God, in the plan and the scheme of redemption, could have chosen a less terrible way for Jesus in the physical form to have died. But it's like he chose that cross. And before he got on it, he's telling them, I want you to be willing to bear your cross. I want you to be willing to pick it up and carry it. Knowing that that's what he was going to have to do, even though they may not have known it. They may not have completely understood it. You and I have that advantage of looking back and connecting those dots that maybe they connected later. It was after, you got to think about this, it was after the crucifixion that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John write their books. So as they're writing them, they were looking back on the things, guided by the Holy Spirit, but using their own personalities, and those things rose to the top on them. It was important. The idea here is that you and I should be the kind of people, we're never going to be able to match the sacrifice of Jesus. We're just not going to be able to do it. I'm never going to. I've already messed it up. Sin has already hurt the sacrifice, even if I were to die the exact same way that Jesus did. I can't, I'm too late in the game. I can't do it the way he did it. I can't match what he did. The point that Jesus is trying to make is not about matching his sacrifice. It's about using his sacrifice as the standard for ours. It's not about matching the sacrifice. It's about taking the Lord's Supper and thinking about what Jesus did. And then taking that fruit of the vine, putting it in our mouths and thinking about the blood of Christ and comparing my life to the life that he lived and died and gave for me. It's the standard. It's what I should be looking at in my life. And so when Paul tells the Romans in chapter 12 that we need to give a reasonable sacrifice, it's what's reasonable for us. Is that if he did this, then every day of our life should be trying to get closer and closer to that. So bearing our cross, carrying our cross is about elevating our level of commitment. It's about elevating spirituality in our life. It's about elevating sacrifice. But it's about one more thing, and I want you to go to the book of Luke. Luke chapter 14, starting at verse 25. Now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and he said to them, he'd just given them a parable about the great supper. He just healed a man. He had just talked to him about taking the lower place. He had just said to him, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Verse 25, now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and he said to them, if anyone comes to me, and this is another time that he said this. We believe this is two different times. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and his mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciples. This is one of those translation issues that's difficult for us. Jesus is not telling us. It would be hypocritical for him to say, love your neighbor but hate your family. I mean, like he's not saying that. What he's saying is in comparison. That's the word that's translated here, hate. It's you unless you're willing to love them less than you love me. He's not trying to diminish the love of the family. He's trying to exalt the love of him, the love for God. So he's not saying you got to hate your family. He's saying that unless you're willing to love them less, and even yourself, whoever does not bear his cross, verse 27, and whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And then he tells them this quick story that we'll conclude with. For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down, verse 28, Luke chapter 14, verse 28. For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he has laid the foundation, he's not able to finish. And all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build, he was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down and first consider whether he's able with 10,000 to meet him who came against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. He says, I want you to elevate the outcome. I want you to elevate what you are committing to. The idea that Jesus is trying to get when he's pointing out carrying the cross, picking up your cross and follow me. He's saying, I want you to understand what kind of commitment I'm asking of you. I want you to understand that this is not about physical, but it's about spiritual. I want you to understand that there's going to be sacrifice in your life, but it's worth it because the sacrifice I made for you is worth it. It's you. You're worth it. He goes, but I want you to elevate the outcome. He's on his way to Jerusalem. He says, you cannot follow me. You can't follow me unless you understand what you're following for. You can't follow me unless you understand what is out there. I want to go to heaven more than anything that I know. That's what's out there. That's what this is about. Carrying a cross doesn't sound like much fun to me, but neither does dying and going to hell. The idea is that Christianity is filled with joys. It's filled with excitement. It's filled with connection. It's filled with love. But sometimes there are things that we have to do as Christians that are based on the principles that make us who we are. And those things are carrying our cross. That's what it's all about. Maybe there's someone here today who's not been baptized for forgiveness of your sins. We'd love to study with you. We'd love to take your Bible in your hand and show you exactly what God promises and what he expects. Maybe there's someone who has been baptized, but you've fallen away and you're not living your life right. Maybe you laid the cross down. You know what I mean? Maybe all you need to do is pick it back up. It's about commitment. It's about sacrifice. It's about the outcome. It's about spirituality. If we can help you in any way today, please let us know how as we stand and sing this song.